Hello, American Crochet Association. Selena Baca here, founder, host, lead educator with the ACA. And it is Tuesday. That means I'm here to chat tips with you guys today. So if you are watching live, come on over, say hey, say hello, tell me where you're viewing from. And let's make this a fun conversation, all right? If you're watching on the replay, just keep on trucking. I promise it's going to be a great topic today filled with great information that you're totally going to use no matter when you watch this, all right? The topic today is three crochet tools that you totally should be using like right now, today. You should stop everything and add these to your crochet tool list if you don't already have them, okay? Now, before we get into each one of those three tools that I totally think you guys need to add, I would love to hear what your favorite crochet tool is. So if you have a favorite one, besides hooks, besides yarn, I mean, those are kind of essential. We can't really crochet without those. So besides those, if you guys have a favorite crochet tool that you just can't crochet without, I would love to hear what it is in the comments, okay? Now, before we get started, let me see who's here. Let me see who's here because it looks like there's already so many comments here and so many of you guys are watching. It looks like our very own Rama is here, Rama Lakshmi. It's always so good to see you. Thank you for checking in. Sherry Richards is checking in here from California. And DePolly is here. Hello, DePolly. So good to see you. Rosetta, hello. And Rosetta is telling us that her favorite crochet tool that she just can't live without is a yarn winder. I would love to hear what you guys think, all right? So if you have a favorite, come on over and chime in, okay? Now, before I read any more comments, which I'm going to do that in just a minute, I'm going to keep on going and I'm going to tell you guys what's number one on my crochet tool list, okay? All right, I'm going to give you guys three tools. My number one tool is anybody going to guess it? I'm sure a few of you who know anything about me is going to guess this one. My number one crochet tool. This is the number one tool that I always tell people to use. And whenever I teach crochet, after I give my students yarn and after I give them a hook, I teach them about stitch markers. I'm telling you guys, stitch markers, they come in a variety of designs, right? There are, the locking mechanisms, there's the clothespin styles that are really colorful, there's ones you can hand make on Etsy, people use paper clips, they use safety pins, there's so many different things people use. In fact, I'm looking around here, but my project bag's downstairs, so I don't have any, but my favorite stitch markers are bobby pins. Yeah, the ones you get in the hair aisle that you put in your hair, bobby pins. I've tried all different kinds of stitch markers and those just happen to be my favorite. Now, it doesn't matter what kind of stitch marker you're using. These are versatile tools in crochet and you absolutely need them for every single project you're using. Let's go through just some of the things you can use them for, okay? First and foremost, it's a stitch marker. So it does what? It marks a stitch. Now, whenever I teach crochet and I incorporate stitch markers, I very much use them as a teaching tool to teach my students how to mark the top of their very first stitch. So let's say I'm teaching my student and they're learning how to make the half double crochet stitch and we're working in rows and I go, okay, we need to chain two. That does not count as a stitch. What does that mean? We totally ignore it. So we're going to take a stitch marker and we're going to put it on the loop on our hook. And that way, when we're working across the row and then we're coming back, we can clearly see the top of the first stitch, which is not that chain two because we totally ignored it. So there's no marker for it. So that's what I mean by it's fantastic for marking a stitch. And it doesn't matter if you're working in rows. It doesn't matter if you're working in the round. It doesn't matter if you've been crocheting forever. Sometimes we're working complicated stitch patterns, complicated repeats, or maybe not at all. Maybe you're just working double crochet stitches back and forth and you're making a washcloth or an afghan or a scarf or something. And what happens? You skip a stitch, you add a stitch, and before you know it, you don't have straight sides. So stitch markers are great for marking stitches in the beginning and the ending of a row or a round. They're also great for place markers. Maybe you have a really complicated stitch repeat and it's like, wow, there's like 15 different stitches in this stitch repeat and I got a ways to go because I'm making a blanket or a shawl. You use those stitch markers to mark the different the different repeats. So wherever the brackets are in that repeat, like from here to here, that's one repeat, stitch marker, and that way you can clearly see, all right, it started with a chain 3, so that's what I see inside, and it ended with a double crochet, and that's where it ends. So it's really great for being a placeholder on items like that, or just for being a placeholder if you have a WIP. How many of you guys have more than one WIP? Don't be shy. I'm the first one to raise my hand. If you have more than one WIP, or if you have any WIPs, those stitch markers can just, you put it on your loop, you put your hook away so that you don't lose your hook, or so that you can use your hook for another project, because let's face it, a lot of us have more than one WIP, and that way you can not only save your place, not that your work is really going to unravel like knitting, but you can save your place, but also you can save your crochet hook. It doesn't have to mark your space, okay? Now, the last thing on my list in terms of great ways to use a stitch marker is to count your rows or count your rounds of work. Now, is that going to be fantastic for everything all the time, no matter what? No, but let's talk about some ways that it can be really important. Let's say you're working a Afghan, or a shawl, or a shirt, something that has lots and lots and lots of rows. And, instead of going back and going, okay, I need 60 rows, instead of counting from 1 all the way over again, maybe you mark every 10th row. Or maybe you're working a pattern that has row multiples of 5. So every 5th row you go, there is another row multiple. Okay, so I've already worked this 1, 2, 3 times. I need 1 more. Great. So it's a great counting indicator. Maybe you're working like a hat or a tote bag or a stuffed animal, and you're working it all in single crochet that's worked in continuous rounds, so that you don't have to constantly stop and count where your row stops and starts, or how many rows around you have. You can just use stitch markers to mark, so you can keep on trucking. All right. So that's my number 1 tool of 3 that everyone should be using. And I already said, it doesn't matter if you started crocheting this morning or if you've been crocheting for 50 years, stitch markers will save your sanity and it will save your project. And it's really just such a great tool for you to incorporate in no matter what you're doing. All right, let's see who's here and what you guys are saying. And I'll give some shout outs. So I'm just, oh my gosh, so many comments. So I just got to scroll for a long time. Rosetta loves stitch markers. Andrea loves stitch markers. She likes yarn needles and scissors as well. Those are very important tools. DePauli loves stitch markers. Jessica Fitzsimmons is here. She says, my must-have tool is stitch markers. She says, I refuse to use them for the longest time. Now I can't live without them. That's exactly what I teach. And again, it doesn't matter how long you've been crocheting. As a matter of fact, the longer you've been crocheting, the more you should know how important these things are. They're just great little reminders. They're great indicators. If nothing else, they're going to save you time and effort and energy. So I'm so glad you learned that lesson, Jessica. Angel is here. Hello. Jessica Millard is here. Loretta is here. Good afternoon. Sherry Richard says, I just caught myself trying to move my screen to change the lighting on your face. I know my lighting is a little weird in here. I'm sorry. I just moved. As you guys can see, my surroundings are a little different. And the lighting in here is terrible. So I really need to come up with a new system so that I don't look like pasty white ghost girl. Sorry, guys. But hopefully you guys love what I'm saying so much that it really doesn't matter what I look like. Hey, Angel. Hey, Connie from Tennessee. Hello, Andrea. She says, guilty. I have to keep 5 or less WIPs. DePauli's asking if this is the Warlock wrap. Yes, it is. I always keep mine nearby. Because yesterday it was freezing cold and I had a sweater on, and today it's not so cold, so I'm wearing a tank top, but it's still kind of cold, so I'm wearing my Warlock wrap. Yeah. Thank you for noticing. Hello, Joe Ralph. Good to see you. Hello, Connie. Donna is here. Donna loves stitch markers. And Joe Ralph. Joe Ralph says stitch markers are so important. Yes, they are. Okay, so that's number 1. If you aren't using them or if you don't have them, get them today. Again, you can find, if you're like, I don't want to buy stuff or add stuff or look for stuff, you can totally find stitch markers in the notions aisle of your favorite yarn store. whether in-store or online, or you can just do what I do and go to Target and go to the hair aisle and get a pack of 50 or 100 for a few dollars. And I'm telling you, if you haven't used bobby pins as stitch markers, you're missing out. You may totally love them, okay? All right, you guys ready to hear what my second tool is that you guys totally have to use? Like right now, today, drop everything and get one today. All right, I think a few of you have guessed it so far, but I'm going to keep trucking. Keep your questions, comments, all that going, okay? Now, tool number 2 on the 3 tools that every crocheter I think absolutely has to have. Tool number 2 is a yarn winder. Do you guys have a yarn winder? Have you ever used a yarn winder? Do you know what it's best for? Some people crochet for years and years and decades and go, I do not need a yarn winder. That was me. I'm telling you, I crocheted forever and always. And I was like, I'm a minimalist. I don't need all this stuff. I can wind my own yarn. It's unnecessary. Okay. I first used a yarn winder when I just broke down. I was like, fine, everyone loves it. Let me try it. Let me get on the bandwagon. I got a yarn winder and I set it up. And I literally wound like all of my yarn remnants. I probably had 200 little cakes of yarn. I was obsessed. I finally saw the light. I thought it was the best thing ever in the entire world. And I am so glad that I got a yarn winder, okay? Let's go through it just a little bit, okay? So yarn winders, you can get them for as little as, I think mine was $15. So you can get them for like 20 bucks or less, and lots of different companies, lots of different yarn companies or notions companies have yarn winders, okay? I'm going to drop a link for the one that I use down in the video description, or in the video description, down, up, wherever the video description is. I will drop a link for mine so that you can at least see the one that I've had and used. I think I've had mine for 5 years now, and it's wound hundreds of cakes of yarns, and it's worked out really nicely for me, okay? Now, I think yarn winders are necessary because it's gonna help transform your yarn into workable units, okay? Now, does everything need to be transformed? No, absolutely not. Whenever you're buying yarn from the store, it's already in a workable unit. You don't have to transform it, okay? It's perfect just the way it is. So most yarn that you buy, leave it. As long as you can work from that unit of yarn, just keep it the way that it is. It's perfect, okay? However, if you are the kind of crocheter, do you guys see this over here? I buy hanks of yarn. Do you buy hanks of yarn? Anyway, if you buy hanks of yarn, just invest in a Swift and a yarn winder, because you're going to have to hold it and then you're going to have to wind it, okay? It's a good investment. If you use those, you need those, okay? And actually, one of the main reasons I broke down and got a yarn winder is I started working with more hanks, and I had a few terrible, crying, depressing scenarios, and I said, fine, I'll get a yarn winder. But then I quickly realized that there were lots of yarns that I was using, bigger units of yarns. Like imagine something like this, okay? Not all yarn that we buy is in this big giant unit like this. And it really depends on what kind of yarn that you're using. Are you using Bernat Super Value? Are you using, Lion Brand Vanish Choice? Are you using those kind of larger units of yarn, but you're not using the entire unit of yarn? And then what are you doing? You have this half skein, half cake that kind of, because you've used most of it, because you've used half of it, it's no longer in this workable unit and can get really tangled. So the reason I love my yarn winder is that all of my partial skeins that used to just be these messy, tangled messes, I can now wind them into cakes. And the reason I love cakes is that this is what it looks like. You wind it up, it makes this perfect little cake. It's so much easier to store your yarn. It's not these tangled messes everywhere. You can stack them. Cakes are stackable. They're stackable. So you just stack them right on top of each other. It's brilliant. And what you can do is, for your manual yarn winder, you take the label off. Don't throw the label away. And then you kind of fold it up and put it in the center. And that way you always have the yarn label in the middle of the cake. So it's brilliant. So it really helps to manage all of those partial skeins. Again, hanks of yarn, it's absolutely great for that. And if you, I'm not saying this is a perfect solution for everything all the time, but if you work with intarsia, or if you are working smaller projects, like let's say you want to make, I don't know, you bought a ton of yarn and you want to make washcloths, right? But you're like, I don't want to carry this thing around. You can cake up as much as you need for a washcloth and just kind of keep going. And then, you have these small little portable units. Again, it's not a great scenario for every single thing that you make, but if you don't want to lug this around, you're making washcloths, you can cake up your yarn and that can be a good solution. So that is my second tip, or that is my second tool of 3 that I think if you guys don't have one and you have either lots of hanks of yarn, or if you have lots of partial skeins of yarn, or if you buy really big units of yarn and you want them to be more manageable, this yarn winder is just fantastic. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. Anna says, I've used my yarn winder to frog. That can be a great reason to use it. I've certainly frogged projects with my yarn winder. So actually, I would add that to the list because it can be just a lifesaver, because there's nothing like frogging a project and then having to wind that up. And let me explain why winding your yarn into cakes is so much better than just hand winding it into a giant ball. Whenever you're hand winding into a giant ball, you're only pulling it from the outside in, or you're going from the outside in. So that ball is just kind of going everywhere. It's just this big giant ball. And also whenever you're hand winding, you can pull the tension out on your yarn, and it can really mess with the integrity of the fibers, right? So it can really kind of like stretch it out, or like it just kind of makes the yarn, it like degrades the quality of the yarn. But with a yarn winder, it's winding it in this really nice way. It can only hold so much tension, or it only puts so much tension on the yarn. So it's a much more squishy little ball, right? So that's a perfect reason. Frances says, okay, I still can't get in. Oh, she's having technical difficulties. I'm sorry. Tapali says, that's a good idea. I thought yarn winder is used only if you have hanks. No, I finally broke down and got the yarn winder because I had hanks. But then I saw these partial units of yarn everywhere. I'm telling you guys, I don't have these little yarn, like if the yarn remnant is the size of your fist or smaller, then your yarn winder is not really going to do anything for you. But if you have enough that's going to make a ball or a cake that's the size of your fist or larger, cake your yarn. It's fantastic. It absolutely is. All right. Joe says, I spent a day winding yarn. It was so fun. Took a video of my Swifton winder. Made me so happy. I was even doing the same thing. And sometimes every now and then, I think it's a lot of fun just to do a live video, and I'll put my yarn on the Swift and I'll kind of wind it up, and it's a fun thing to watch. It is really fun. So I do agree with you. There's something so satisfying and meditative about winding up yarn. And again, the satisfaction of having all of your yarn, even your remnants, being really neat, beautiful little cakes, that's pretty fantastic. So I'm glad you felt the same, Joe. Angel says, I really, really want and need a yarn winder. I have a disability and it's hard to ball up skeins, so I'm trying to save. I can't wait. Again, I think that you can buy even really economical choices. Mine was super economical. I'm going to find a link to it and put it in the video description. But feel free to purchase from any brand or any type that you are comfortable with, especially if, you have shipping restrictions or things like that. Jessica, I got a small winder for the remnants and I do enjoy it. Connie does not have one. Sherry says, I love my winder, just wish it could hold more yardage. Yeah, that's another thing to look for. Most yarn winders, and you have to read up, okay? Most yarn winders are not going to wind more than about 3.5 ounces. Okay, so, think about something like this. It's not going to hold more than this, so it's only going to overflow and get tangled. So if you want it to hold more, you're really going to have to do a little bit of digging and see where you can find a yarn winder that's going to hold more, or have like a, make special accommodations for that. Joe loves her yarn winder. DePauli does not have one and has never used one. There's so much, they really are so much fun. And if you have kids, your kids are going to want to help you wind your yarn. Like my son, He thinks it's so fun to help me wind up my yarn into cakes. So he's like, hey mom, you got another one for me? Come on, mom, I want another one. So he really enjoys it. It's something fun we can kind of do together. Angel, okay, and Angel's talking about stitch markers, and she loves stitch markers, and I think that's all the comments that I see about yarn winders, which is the second tool on our list of 3 that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to move on, and I'm going to tell you guys about the last tool. And I saved the best for last, I really did. And this is something that whenever I don't use this, I am so mad at myself. I could kick myself whenever I don't use it, okay? So what I'm going to tell you guys about, I've got a free tool for you. You can download it. You can copy it. I've got, if you want a written version of everything I'm talking about here today, just click on the link in the video description and you'll get a rundown of all the tools that I'm talking about, including this one. Tool number 3, WIP Notecard. Okay, a friend of mine told me about this, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago, something like that. And the minute she told me about it, it literally changed my crochet life. It changed the way I was crocheting. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you what a WIP Notecard is. Now, we already said before with the when we were talking about stitch markers that we all have WIPs. Most of us do. Some of us are just really good about finishing everything that they start, but me, I'm terrible. I have lots of WIPs. I just, when I moved into this office, I was kind of cleaning out my closets and stuff. I found 10 WIPs that I totally forgot about. 10. Okay, and some of them I worked on so long ago that they did not include a WIP note card. Now, this is why a WIP note card is important, okay? When you're working on a project, and it doesn't matter if you're going to start and finish it on day 1. I think having a note card, maybe you don't print this exact thing, but at least gives you a template of things that you can record so that you have the best information possible about your project, okay? So again, doesn't matter if you're going to start and finish that project today or if it's something that you're going to be working on for the next 6 months. A WIP note card gives you everything you need to know about that project, and that way you can remember everything about that project. So maybe you want to make it again, maybe you put it in the closet for 6 months and you want to pick it up again. Here are all the important details on here. Pattern name, pattern location, yarn brand used, yarn colors used, hook size used, pattern size, date started, notes. Let me start from the top and just kind of go down, okay? And let me explain to you why this is important for some of the projects that I've worked on, okay? So some of the projects that I've found, one of them was a scarf, okay? One of them was a scarf, and it's in a bag, and there is no WIP note card in there, and there's nothing in there other than the yarn and the project, and it's half finished. I don't know what pattern it is. There's no pattern name in there. Where did I get this pattern? That's what pattern location is. So did I get it on Ravelry? Did I find it on Pinterest? Is it on somebody's blog? Is it in my email? Did I find it in a book? What page? Where did I find this pattern? Yarn brand used. That's really important for people who remove their yarn labels or lose their yarn labels or completely forget what yarn. They're like, I'm going to remember this yarn, but then they completely forget. Yeah, that you can note that here. Also, yarn colors used. Some yarns are going to be super easy. There's like 6 colors and that's it. Some yarns have like 100 different colors. So it's like, is it moss or evergreen? Or is it sage? Ooh, I'm not sure because there are 4 different greens that look exactly the same and my project could be any one of those. And what if you need to order more yarn in that exact same color? How are you going to know? Hook size used. This has saved me so many times because there's so many times I'm working on a project, I put it away, I need my hook, I put my stitch marker into my project, right? And I go, I'm going to remember it's an I. I'm just going to remember because I know everything. I remember everything. I'm like an elephant. And then I go back to that project and there's no hook in there. And I'm like, did I use a G? Did I use an H? And then you start going, oh, I probably used a J. And then, you're like 2 rows in, you go, no, I didn't use a J. You're guessing, so you're wasting time, right? Now, date started. I love that about this because, and everybody's different, but when I put a start date on my project, it helps me to remember the timeline, okay? Maybe I just need to remember the timeline because maybe I'm working on a project for someone. Maybe I'm making an order for someone, and maybe I'm keeping track of how many times I worked on it, or how long I've worked on it, or how long it takes me to make something. So I'm annotating my time on here, okay? Maybe I just really want to be aware of how long something is taking me because I'm trying to manage my crochet time. I'm making Christmas projects. I don't know how long this is going to take me. I'm starting this now. It's a great indicator, so I don't have to remember everything on the face of the earth because let's face it, I can't even remember what hook I used for this. And then notes, any kind of notes that you have for this particular pattern. I swatched and I had to go down a hook size. I needed to add 3 extra rounds to make the hat slouchy. What notes do you have for your pattern? Okay. Now again, you can use this for any kind of project, right? Something that you're going to start and finish today or something you're going to work on for months. I'm a huge advocate for annotating every project that you make in a way that allows you to build your crochet resume for any reason. Maybe you just want to, better your skills or keep track of what you make, what you liked, what you didn't like. Use this so that you can add your projects to places like Ravelry, okay? You've got all of your information here, especially the notes. Maybe you like to make a sweater and you made it in a medium, but you should have made it in a large, or you had to change your hook size, or you had to substitute yarn. Here's all your information. You can easily put it in there. And that way, maybe if you make it again, you already have all those details, okay? Next time you work on a project and you go, I'm going to remember, I'm going to put you in this bag and I'm going to pick you up next week. And then 6 months later, you go and you find, oh, wow, I have 10 project bags that I totally forgot about. This WIP note card will save you. Oh, it was this pattern. It's on so-and-so's blog. This is the yarn color. This is the hook size. Great. This is everything I need to know. So definitely click on over to our blog. You can find the link in the video description to at least print, download, save this for later, and definitely use it for your projects, okay? All right, so those are my 3 crochet tools that every crocheter should start using. I would love to hear what you guys think. So let me start with Angel. She says, I use index cards to write the info on and use stitch marker to attach it to my project. It's been a lifesaver. That's a fantastic idea. And if you didn't think about all of these different indicators, definitely add these to whatever system that you have. Sharon says, my memory is not like it used to be. I know, right? Or we always think, I'm going to remember that. It's so easy. And then we go to pick up our project again or something and we're like, oh, I forgot that detail. And it's a very important detail. Jessica says, I always want these after I finish the WIP from years ago. Yeah, it's things like that. We're going to, if you ever want to make the thing again, you're going to need these details, right? I know that some of us, we can get a little cocky, like, I can look at everything. I can look at anything and figure it out. But maybe you're looking at a hat that you made 5 years ago that you love, that you want to make again. You're like, oh man, I don't remember the yarn. I don't remember the hook. I don't remember where I got the pattern. I don't remember what size I made. This is going to be a lifesaver, okay? You don't have to play detective if you make notes, all right? Loretta, I have a crochet notebook. Yes. Crochet notebooks are fantastic. And I also keep a crochet notebook. But the thing that's different about this is that your WIPs usually aren't going to stay in those notebooks. Okay. So if this is specifically with your WIP, okay, this is separate, then that's really going to be a lifesaver because it's going to be with your project. And when you're finished with your project, then you can keep this either in your notebook for later, or you can add that project, take a picture of it, add your notes to Ravelry, and that will be like your virtual crochet notebook. So I think that's a lifesaver. So I definitely use both, and I think each one, having a notebook and having a WIP note card, I think both of those are going to be great tools. Jessica Fitzsimmons, she says, WIP cards. Yes, I just started using them. I messed up a project because I couldn't remember what hook I was using. This will help save you, I promise. Andrea, she says, I use Ravelry as my WIP manager note card. That's a fantastic idea as well. And I would just caution you that if for some reason you can't pair up what you're making with the project, that you have on Ravelry, like for example, maybe you go, oh, I don't want to take a picture now. I just don't want to put in all these notes. I mean, maybe, Andrea, you've really got those details set and that's a fantastic virtual system for you. But I feel like I can be a little lazy and sometimes not lazy, but I'm so, you know, I'm so immersed in what I'm doing that I don't want to log on and do that. I just want to make some quick notes about the project that I have, and then I want to slip it into the bag, and that way I will have it there, you know, for me no matter what. So typically what I do, and everyone's different, and I encourage you to do whatever is comfortable for you. Typically what I do is I make the entire project, and then when it's done, I add it to Ravelry, because then at that point, I do have my final finishing notes. I do have my final, you know, measurements and things like that. So anything final, especially the final picture, I can do all of that at one time. So that's just what works better for me. But again, do whatever works best for you, because it is your crochet life. Joe, oh yes, usually use a note card, but didn't on one WIP. So mad at myself. I know it really makes a difference. Sherry Richard, she says, yes, I wish I would remember to write one every time I start a new project. Well, if you go to our site, you can download this, or at least, you know, put the template to memory, and that way you have one every time you've got a WIP. All right. DePolly, she's going to check out the yarn winders. Good. All right. And that's the last comment that I see about these 3 crochet tools. If you guys had a favorite tool that we talked about today, let me know in the comments. If you guys are going to go and snag one of these tools and start using them today, let me know in the comments, okay? If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments, all right? Let's make this a conversation. And if you thought this was fantastic, please hit that share button and share this video in just one place where you enjoy crochet. I'd really appreciate it. Again, for a written version of everything that we talked about today, just click on the link in the video description to include downloading this fantastic little WIP note card. All right. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining me today on this Tip Tuesday. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace, love, crochet. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.